Welcome to Calming the Chaos podcast, where we help you find peace in a chaotic world. I'm Tracy Canella, licensed mental health counselor, certified eating disorder specialist, and advanced clinical hypnotherapist. Calming the Chaos podcast provides you with self-help resources for handling anxiety, stress, and overwhelm. It is not a substitute for counseling or psychotherapy. So if you like what you hear, please subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks for tuning in. And now, let the chaos begin. And the chaos has begun. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Am I a green nightmare or what? Here I am. I'm going to be talking about a very important subject that does have to do with green, and no, it's not money. It is about climate and our world. If you are interested in climate change and you want to learn a little bit more about it, we are going to talk with Lee Schneider today. And he has written several books about how life might look in the future. And he is very passionate about climate change. And his books do have climate disasters in them as well. He's done some research. He's also had a really interesting background in the screenplay and in film and TV. And so he's just an all-around cool guy. I'm going to bring Lee up, and he could probably do his intro better than I can. Welcome, Lee, to Calming the Chaos.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And I really am looking forward to this talk today because, first off, I'm really interested in hearing about your past with screenplays and film, TV work, and then how you ended up shifting into the work that you're doing now. So go ahead and add on to my intro about yourself, if you will. Tell us more about yourself, Lee.
Sure. Well, I actually started in fiction writing, but when I was 19, I thought I was going to be the world's greatest novelist, and maybe I am, but at the time, no one would pay me to do that. So I did write some early novellas and fiction works, but I soon realized that, I got married, I had a family, that was not going to pay the bills. And it was a really hard way to every day get up and write, pull out of your mind and write fictional stuff. I had an opportunity to work as a writer for Good Morning America. I was living in New York, and I lived down the street, and I was an easy guy to call when someone got sick. I could sub easily. I could just get on the subway and pop into the office. So I started writing for those, let's call them characters, because I was writing plays at the time and writing fiction. And yet, when you write for an on-camera personality, it's a character, right? You have to meet that person's voice. So that worked, and I did that for a while, and did all kinds of other things. When you're a young married fellow with a baby on the way, I wrote cartoons, I wrote short-form documentaries, I wrote for A&E before it was A&E. Basically I wrote a ski movie. I know nothing about skiing, and I got hired to write a movie about skiing, and of course got fired. That was the only time I'd actually been fired, because I don't know anything about skiing, but I somehow talked them into writing the movie. It started there's a lot of salesmanship in that kind of writing. And I was able to, I saw the opportunity of California, and I started to travel to California just to pitch things, to see if I could get jobs in movies and television. And I would tell people that they would see my area code, which at the time was a 718 in Brooklyn, and there's an 818 out here in California. And they would say, "Where's the 718 area code?" And I'd say, "Well, that's the New Brooklyn area code." And they say, "Where's New Brooklyn?" And the conversation would come around to, "Can you be here tomorrow for a meeting?" I say, "Sure." And I would literally book the tickets. You could do that in those days, get on a flight and go and show up the next day for meetings. So I got some TV work and I got some movie work. And that was fun and great. And there's a expression, you can make a killing in the theater, but you can't make a living. And I would make enough on one TV show to buy a new car. And then after a while, it would be, whoa, well, where's the next TV show coming from? Or, can I
Wow.
close another deal? And I did face that kind of blank screen again, where it was, it's really hard to pull things out of your head every day. And now you have the added pressure of, well, I have a little child now at the time, one, and we have rent to pay, and we'd moved to California. This is all kind of new. It's fun and crazy and interesting, but it's new. And I just started to literally go door to door, knocking on the doors of radio stations and television stations, because I didn't know anybody here really. And I would literally show up with a resume in hand and say, "Are you looking for writer producers?" And they would, of course, say, "Go away." But eventually, someone at Entertainment Television said,
Oh.
"I'll give you a shot. Why don't you come in and try?" So I came in. I thought it was a joke because at that time the offices were over a lumber yard, and it was a very strange part of Hollywood, and I was thinking, someone's playing a joke on me. And they said, "Well, here's a videotape, and here's a little floppy disk, and put them together to make a story." So I went over to the little computer they gave me. It was a little Apple Mac computer, first time I'd ever seen a Mac. And yeah, and I just wrote a story and I gave it to them. They said, "Okay, write another." And then I did that like 3, 4, 5 times. And then by the end of the day, they said, "I think we should hire you because you've actually written more than anybody else here today." So I got that reputation of that sort of deadline writer, just kind of turning stuff around. And so I wrote for local news and would write, you go in, you write as many stories as you can. It would be very competitive. Can you write 20 stories in a night? Woo, woo. It's like really go for it kind of stuff. A lot of high stress, crazy people. And that became writing for eventually Fox News for a while before it became the Fox News that it is now. And and Dateline NBC to write news magazine stuff. And from there, I went into documentaries for a while. And all this time, I'm making money and starting production companies and pitching projects until roughly 2009. I had that kind of blank screen feeling again, and I was working on a television show for History Channel. It was called Breaking Point. And I said, Breaking Point, that's a really good title. If I'm going to leave television, this would be a great one to go out on. So I did. I had podcasting gear, and because I had been producing television stuff, so I had microphones and I had stuff, and I just decided to try podcasting. So I literally stopped TV. I haven't gone back yet, and got into podcasting for clients and being a podcast audio producer. But the writing bug came back, and eventually started writing short stories. It's a sort of thing, it's a coping mechanism in some ways, writing to stay sane. But I started writing short stories. I started writing short radio plays, and I played around with novels for a while also, and wrote a couple of them that I thought were pretty good, but not good enough. They would go out to agents, wouldn't get picked up. And at that time, I didn't know that much about self-publishing, so I didn't do it. I kind of gave up on them. They're still in the closet. And it's still in the drawer, that kind of classic novel in the drawer. But then this one was different. This novel, Surrender, which, I hate surrendering. So I gave it the title of something that I hate on purpose to kind of challenge myself. I hate giving up, but I hate what I've learned is it's very powerful to surrender to something in a good
Mm.
way. Hence the title of the book. So this one caught on for reasons we'll probably talk about in a minute, but this one became, when you write a novel, it's like running a marathon. You got to go, keep going and keep going. And people are handing you little cups of water, and, you have to find a way to keep going. And you have to really care about what you're working on, or else it's not worth the marathon. You may as well just walk the rest of it. So with this book, which took a couple of years to write, and I'm into writing the sequel now, I found that kind of inner fire, that kind of motor that makes you want to keeping on with the
Mhm.
book. So that's kind of it's kind of a long monologue, but that's the capsule summary.
Monologue. Of course, you'd say monologue being in show business
Right.
formally, right?
Right.
Yeah, I have just about a million questions for you because that was great. One of the things is because, we're all about chaos here on this channel, on this podcast. And it really sounds like those years you described when you were married, a young adult, you had a baby on the way, and you were having to go pitch yourself. And
Right.
so you must have pitched yourself enough, but it must have been very chaotic, not knowing where your next meal was coming from, next paycheck was coming from. I'm just wondering how, as a young man back then, how did you calm your chaos?
Well, not well, to begin with. The marriage at that time failed. I'm no longer married to that person, in part because it was, it's a really hard way to make a go, and you
Mhm.
really need the support of a partner if you're going to have a partner. I found that the coping strategies that I picked then were okay, but not great. I've always been an avid runner.
Mhm.
I've always gardened, and these are things that help kind of dial back when you're running. If you're trying to think of the next screenplay character, you're probably going to trip over something. I've done this, and it's not good. You have to concentrate on what you're doing. But there is a turning point in this where way back when I was working in Burbank uh, for NBC, I had an hour commute every day. No matter what I did, I tried all these different routes and all these different ways. I tried the freeways, surface streets. It always took an hour up and back. So it meant leaving early in the morning and coming home too late at night. And it was a super stressful job. I was doing investigations. My phone was tapped. When you do investigations, you go after people and people come after you. It's a very out there, rough, emotional position. So one day I was driving home and I saw this yoga studio. I'd never done yoga. I didn't know anything about yoga then. And I said, I think I have to do that. I think I have to try that. It was just one of those like bolt from the blue moments. So I literally pulled over the car, said I'm going to be late. And I went in there and I took a yoga class. And it became this, well, wait a minute, this is okay. Like if I did this every day, if I did meditation every day, it's going to be this moment where I could open up, turn off the high revolution processor of the mind, and just let some of the other stuff float up, good and bad. And I've ever since I've pretty much done yoga every day, and I meditate pretty much every day. And that is really the thing that has kept me in, not only being a creative person, but now I'm married, kept me a father, kept me from going off the road, all those bad things. I'd say yoga and meditation have really helped me a lot.
Yeah, and it's definitely a good preventative measure for you want to have your resources built up so that when chaotic moments come up that you're able to handle them more effectively and use skills. You're
Right.
much more apt to be able to do that if you have some sort of preventative measure. I think physical activity is one of those things, but for you, it sounds like you just switched to being like all zen and stuff, right?
It helps. Well, I still run. I play tennis. I run. The getting out in nature, getting out in the world really helps, especially when, even as a producer, I'm in my head a lot. I'm on machines a lot. So these counterbalances do make a big difference, and it's very easy for me to kind of push through, and go for it. And then the next day I don't feel so well, or I'm yelling at somebody, or something bad happens. And I realize, it's actually pretty smart to try to wind myself down at the end of the day by 5:30 if I can do it somehow.
Wow.
Like and I have my computer goes to dark mode at 5, and I have a little blip thing that comes up that says, remember to calm down and remember to slow down, because I love to work and I would just keep going. And it's great.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm supposed to be writing 600 words a day on the new novel, and I write easily 1,200 a day or 1,700 a day because I like doing it. I have to stop myself from doing the work. But stopping is a valuable skill, uh,
Mhm.
I've learned. It's the inverse of, well, I'm not motivated or I don't know what to do. And I'm a definite procrastinator and slow starter, but once I get going, I'm very difficult to stop. So all these strategies really help balance. It's a balance thing.
Mhm. Wow, I am guilty of that as well. I seem to not want to stop, and I don't know if it's just my curious mind that wants to keep going, but I like your strategy of shutting down at 5:30, but that would mean for me, I'd come through the door and I'd have to just completely shut down because that's about the time I come through the door after my workday is over, but I
Yeah.
get your point there. All those kind of tools and tips work as preventative and triage methods of calming chaos. I do want to ask you about that day, the day that you went to E, and you were asked to come up with these ideas on the fly, and you were able to do, what'd you say, 6 of them on a floppy
Yeah,
disk?
a lot. Yeah. I mean, probably about six.
How did you handle that? For me, I was thinking I was being in your story. I was thinking my mind would just be going either blank or everywhere at once. How did you manage to do that? How did you manage to get through it?
I think that, well, I have a certain level of confidence in my creative and writing skills that is very hard to shake. You know,
Mhm.
when pitching, you're going to get rejected a lot. You write a whole novel, it gets rejected. You send it to 30 agents, it gets rejected. So there's a lot of reason to go, forget it. I'll go do something else. But I do have a lot of confidence in just the ability to write something and express. And I think I'm, in a positive way, challenged by, okay, this is going to be hard. A lot of the documentaries I did for History Channel and other networks were science documentaries, architecture documentaries, engineering documentaries, and they often involved getting people to explain complicated things. And I became the guy who could take this complicated thing and explain it. So I was grateful for that. And it wasn't that hard. I don't mean to say it's all easy, but it wasn't like, oh, this is going to be really, I, I didn't have that kind of emotional response. I
Yeah.
had the response of, this is going to be challenging. And, but on my own terms, I'm not going to fail. I could fail on their terms. I've been fired twice. The ski movie, where I didn't know anything about skiing, and I talked my way into writing a movie about skiing. And one day after I left E, I went back to work at E later, and they had something, and still do, I think, called the Style Network. And I was hired as a writer producer for the Style Network, and they decided that I had no style one day, and I came to work in a $250 Japanese Kenzo designer shirt, happened to be insect green. And my mother gave it to me, and I thought, this is fantastic. I am totally styling now. And that's the day I was fired from the Style Network, wearing a $250 Kenzo shirt. And and
Oh my
then
goodness.
I had to give that shirt away. I could never wear it again because,
Oh,
so, things happen, but I don't think that had a negative impact on my writing ability. Is like,
mhm,
these people are crazy. I mean, okay, maybe I don't have any style, but I could still write a story. I could still look at a videotape and still make something up that would be, and fact check it and make it work. So
mhm,
I guess it's this kind of, I'm a firstborn child, a family of three. And it's kind of this firstborn, like, I got this feeling, which definitely has taken a few hits. It's not like
mhm,
it's all perfect, but there is that kind of, I'm going to work this out. This is going to be hard. Like
mhm,
writing itself is often, you start in the morning, and if I have a good outline or a good idea of what I'm doing and I may depart from it, great. But sometimes it's like, this is sucks or this doesn't
mhm,
work. And that then I'll usually switch modes. I'll take out a notebook and a pen, and I'll write I don't know what to write today, 100 times into not 100 times, but I'll write by hand, what if the character did this? What if, you have to just fool yourself in a way,
Mhm.
or put your book into a different font and read it as though someone else were reading it. There are lots of little tricks like that.
Well, so what you're saying in a nutshell is it takes a certain amount of confidence in your own skill, which is probably why my mind started to panic at the thought of doing that, because I don't have that sort of skill set. So you have a certain amount of confidence in your own skill set. You are resilient because apparently you've been rejected quite a few times knocking on those
Sure.
doors. And so that develops quite a bit of resiliency in the long run. And then you have positive self-talk because you're telling
Right.
yourself this is going to be really super difficult, you can get through it. And that I think is golden right there for any of you who are listening and who are out there. I was thinking as you were talking, I thought, yeah, if they put me in a room and told me sing a couple of songs, I could be able to do that, and I would
Yeah,
know that I
right.
could do it well. I could do it all day, and I would have the confidence. And I don't know what I would probably get hired doing something. I don't know, maybe voiceover acting or something. I have very much confidence in my voice. And so, yeah, okay, I get it now. I get why
Yeah,
you didn't
that's
completely
funny.
freak out on that day.
Right. And there's a lot, when you write plays and direct plays, the actors come up to you and they say, "You've written this character, Mary. Now, what was she like as a child? Like the first time she was disappointed or something like that." And then I would say, in my mind, I have no idea. Like I didn't really think about the character that deeply. But I got used to just saying to the actor, I don't know, but let's improvise. Let's work it out together. Why don't
Yeah.
you give me some ideas and I'll give you some ideas and we'll write it into the script?
Mhm.
Because it's as a fiction author, you're assumed that you know everything about everything that's in the book and all the people, but Don DeLillo, a novelist, has famously said that he claims to forget every book that he's written and forget how he did it and what it's about. And I can empathize with that because you get into this world and the actor's asking you the question, and sometimes you know the answer and sometimes you don't. And I think that ability to improvise, like, if someone said to you, improvise a song in the style of something, you'd go, well, okay, I can do that.
Mhm.
There's a certain amount of skill set level something that gives you the boost to say, sure, I'll give it a try.
Mhm. Yeah, I am a songwriter too. So if somebody were asked me to go into a room and write a song, I can do it. I
Yeah,
can do it within well, I can write and produce and video a song in a day.
yeah,
And
great.
it's
Yeah.
really super cool to have your talent. So what you need to do, people out there, is recognize what your talents, strengths, and gifts are, and go out there and just do your good stuff, which is really pretty much my message on this channel anyway. So
Hmm.
rock
Hmm.
on, everybody. And happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. I want to know what you think of this picture. Does it look at all like your shirt that you wore on that day? Was it this kind of green?
Yeah, a little bit more acid green, but kind of like that.
Not with the leprechauns on it or the,
No, no leprechauns,
hats?
unfortunately.
No.
No, no.
Well, I'm choosing to say that you were fired that day because of the shirt and not because of your skill. But hey, that's
Could
just
be.
me, right? I tend to keep it on the optimistic side.
Right.
Well, I wanted, since we are on the topic of green and I am a green nightmare today, are you wearing any green on this St. Patrick's Day?
Unfortunately not. I brought out a shirt and I showed it
Mm,
to my wife and child and I said, look, there are some tiny green stripes in this shirt. And they argued with me. They said, no, that's brown. It's brown. And I said, it's green. I have to, and no. And I looked close and it probably was a little bit more brown than green. So I failed at the green test because I just couldn't really find anything. I have a green, like Patagonia jacket, but I'd be like sweating if I wore that. There's a little
Wow.
green. This book is called One Green Thing, so there's a little green
Oh,
there in the picture.
okay. You've got
Something.
green on your screen. I was going to say, if you're not wearing the green, I am going to pinch you through the screen.
Uh,
And this is, I guess, my little joke of the day or whatever it is. But yeah, wow. And this is the way I pinch people through the screen. Are you ready?
I hope so.
There,
All right.
officially consider yourself pinched through the screen. Although
Okay.
technically you are wearing green on your screen because of that book in the background. So
Right.
yes. Yeah. Well, so speaking of green, what got you interested in climate change and climate related things? Tell me how you made that transition.
Sure. Well, I really started thinking about, in an abstract way, in a way that I couldn't action really, about what kind of world I was leaving for my children. I have 3 children now, and the youngest, who's 10, who lives with us, is quite concerned and interested in what his world is going to be like. And he feels probably a sense of being out of control, or a loss of control, or what can he do? Uh, and I empathize with that, because he's going to turn 11 soon, but he's just a little kid, and these problems are big. These are huge problems. So I was writing Surrender, but not really, it wasn't really catching yet, but it was in draft. And during that period, we had a lot of fires a couple of years ago here in California and north. And the smoke from the fires came into our neighborhood. We live in Southern California,
Yeah.
and suddenly we couldn't go outside, and we had to
Mhm.
close all the windows, and we have air purifiers, but we had to turn them on. And it suddenly struck me that, we're living in this right now. Like, what if you couldn't go outside? And I remembered when I worked in Burbank with NBC, the air pollution back then was pretty bad. And there were times when you had alerts and you couldn't go outside.
Mhm.
So it was, well, wait a minute, this is really happening. This is here now. And it made me think. So I started to research. I started to research, what are the climate models? What's it going to look like here in California? Will we be able to live here? Will people be able to have water or raise crops? Or, right now, California is a huge farming state. What's going to happen, in 10, 20 years? Do I want to buy a house here? Is it crazy? I mean, it's already crazy because it's an earthquake zone, but
Right.
would you just not be able to go outside? And that really started the ball rolling, all
Mhm.
the starting to do the research. And I did a podcast as a host and producer called The Future of Food. And I did 3 seasons of that. And mostly the first season was about technical solutions to food problems. Like, let's get this cool tracking app, or let's find a way to farm fish, or maybe people would eat more seaweed. And some of those were valid, and some were just technical gimmicks. In the second season of Future of Food, we did regenerative farming and farming practices, and trying to understand the earth as a resource that we have to take care of, and who is doing that, because that all
Mhm.
connects to where your food comes from. And the third season of that I did on how restaurants are surviving during the pandemic, which became a whole supply chain argument. And where's our food coming from, and we take so much for granted, about things that operate smoothly,
Mhm.
like, we can just go. What happens when the shelves are bare and you go to the markets, which happened plenty of times, and during the pandemic, there was just you couldn't buy the food you wanted, for example,
Mhm.
or you couldn't go out to get it, or you couldn't go in the store to get it. And all of
Right.
those things accrued into a OMG moment of, now wait a minute, this is not the future. This is the now
It
that
is.
is behaving like we were told the future would be.
Mhm.
But the key to all science fiction is, it's not about the future at all. It's about a version of the present that just hasn't happened yet. And I read science fiction to see what now is like, in a way, another version of now. So
Mhm.
that all connected for me. And made me want to write the book and made me want to continue with the kind of podcasting and other projects that I'm doing, to think about,
Mm.
we have this situation where, we're not being such good neighbors to other species, where we're being pretty dominant. It's our nature as humans. And there's a wonderful book called Stop Trying to Save the Planet, which I read recently. And Jenny Price is the author of that. And she makes the very wonderful point that a lot of our world, a lot of our economy is optimized to make a few people wealthy and to provide goods and services cheap and fast. But that's not really a great system for, of course, taking care of everybody, but taking care of this wonderful planet that we live on. It's a
Yeah.
system for making goods cheap and fast, which works in, it's a great wealth generator for not everyone, but a few. And we have fixed a lot of problems, but we've, in the process, broken a lot of things.
Mm.
And so books like uh, that and One Green Thing, this other green book, are books that I read that really started me thinking about, well, what can you do?
Yeah.
What, if anything?
Hmm. I do remember, because my family is in Northern California, and I remember those fires vividly. And we were affected a little bit by the Canadian fires a
Mm,
couple of years ago,
mhm,
because we're in Washington State. And I was thinking that same thing. It would look like it was a foggy day during the daytime.
right.
And it was, what, 90 degrees, but it was really super, I mean, hazy. And I also remember in the 70s when I was growing up, there were days where we couldn't do PE or we couldn't go out to play because
Right.
of the smog. And I also remember as a young adult living in Oregon, as I was going down I-5 to visit my family, there was this cloud, there was this point in the freeway where you see the cloud that you were going to go
Yeah.
into, and it was the haze and it was the smog. And it was almost like I knew that the fresh air would be ending soon, and I would be going down into the part of California that really was very smoggy. And that's not even Southern California. I was going to Northern
Right.
California. I was going to the Bay Area.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I worked in Burbank, you could, there would be alerts posted, and you could go outside and look at a brown sky. Literally, like,
Yeah.
that sky is not blue.
Hmm.
And I never had allergies, sneezy kind of allergies in my life. They popped up when I was in Burbank, and they haven't really gone away since, although they're reduced.
Hmm.
Because that really was you couldn't be outside, really. You had to be
Hmm.
careful. So all those things, it's very, it makes it very literal and concrete. All these abstract ideas become, wow, you know, this is now.
Well, even back in the 70s, I'm just even now just remembering 1975, 10 years old, in the swimming pool. Everybody has pools in California, right? We had this
Mm,
stand up above ground pool. We were playing in it. We loved to play. And I remember this one time I got out and I noticed that my lungs hurt. And I told my mom, I said,
mm,
"Mommy, my lungs hurt." And she said, "Oh, you've just got smog in your lungs." And like it
mm,
was no big deal. I think it probably helped to know that there was an explanation for it, that I wasn't going to die, but it really
right.
hurt my little lungs.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be
So,
scary.
yeah. So that was back in the 70s. So when we talk about climate change, are you referring to, because of some of these natural disasters, fires or tornadoes, that it is changing and affecting our planet? Because I know some people think, well, there's no such thing as global warming. There's no such thing as climate change. Everybody's just making that up. That's like a different, like, leftist sort of philosophy. Well, what do you have to say about that? About people who are a little bit more on that? I really don't believe that there is anything wrong with the planet. It's just cycling through something. So they're doubters.
Yeah. It's very hard. If people have a strong belief, there's practically no fact that you could offer that would change that belief. If one day a person of that belief goes out and can't breathe because of smog, or the sky is brown, that may be a belief changer, because it really gets you where you live, literally. But there is a
Mhm.
lot of data now. The scientists are no longer in doubt. about what's happening. The planet is getting warmer, and what that means is the ice on the poles is melting, and that means that water levels are rising. And before we tune out and go, oh, complex, too much, it's good to think about this is a whole system we're talking about here. There's a whole planetary system. So if water even rises an inch or two or a foot, we're going to see parts of our coastal cities erased, or we won't be able to go there anymore. There are projections I've seen that put big pieces of what is now, say, Queens, which is already built on a marsh in New York, underwater. Like there, you won't be able to go there. And there are projections I've seen that show, you think Mississippi's hot in the summer now, or you think Texas is hot now in the summer. You're going to see that band of red, if you're visualizing a map, and that band of red of hot is getting higher and higher, and you're going to be able to farm in northern New York and in Michigan. And when we have droughts here in California, it's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah.
There are there's no vegetables in the markets, or you go on a hike and it's dust. You're just hiking in dust. There's no water at all. And people might say, well, it just rained a lot in California. Isn't the drought over? And yeah, it's great that it's rained so much. Of course, houses fall off the hills and things flood. But the erratic nature of that is also a problem. There are projections I've seen where you look at a place like a country like Thailand, Bangkok, where the water is so high that they've literally learned how to build homes on stilts and make them above the water. And we may be doing that in places, in California, for example, and maybe up north too, because the erratic nature, we may get monsoon-like weather for a while and then terrible drought for a while. And people may already in some places, people are already starting to need to move in the global south, where in places in India and places like that, where seem very far away, but it's all the same planet. And when people can't live in their home country anymore and they have to leave because there's no water, well, those people may come to places where we live now. And it's, it's hard to put these things together in a way. It's like, well, why are there immigrants? What are they running from? Why are they coming from their country? Well, it could be political. It could be climate. We may be seeing more people who have come to our country or come to Europe or come to more northern places because of there's no water in their country, or little water, or there's a terrible drought and they can't grow food. And that all seems, as I keep saying, like too big, too complicated, too global, but it is. There's a huge connectedness, which we haven't, as a species, we haven't really appreciated it enough. We just kind of build stuff and make roads and make cars and we do our thing, and we dominate, and we're good at that, and we generate wealth, and we're good at that, but it may be coming back to us in a way that we just haven't considered enough.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a really big drought. I believe again, it was in the 70s, and we did learn to not flush our toilets. We learned to, on alternative days, we could either water our plants, but we learned how to take Navy showers.
Right.
So, and so you learn those things when you're growing up in California, especially. Some people would say like, yeah, well, California is going to eventually separate from the United States anyway, and just like float away into the Pacific someplace. And that's been a rumor for as long as I've been alive,
Right.
and probably longer. But still, it's really super sobering to hear you talk about the warming of the places, and then people having to leave their homes and their home
Right.
places to come live to other places, and having so many people that I know and love in California. I want to know what it is that you think that we should be doing then. So we're trying to increase some awareness here without being too
Yeah.
radical. But I do, I mean, that's what we've been doing so far. But I do want to know if you have some practical things that we as viewers can do to help preserve, like you say, this precious planet that we all live on.
Yeah. Well, look, it's certainly overwhelming. I mean, there's a big list of things when you start looking at what could be. But I think that a very simple way to start, and the book One Green Thing is very good at this, is it helps you see what kind of type you are. It's got quizzes and tests and personality things, and it starts you thinking about, well, if I like hiking, am I kind of a nature person? Or if I like sharing ideas, am I kind of a share idea person? Am I more philosophical, or am I more philanthropic? Who am I? And it kind of does a fun way of finding that personality type. So you could kind of be more you, be who you are in a way that would help this situation. For me, a big thing for me is appreciating nature. I'm a pretty tech guy. I do this a lot. I write on computers, I write on phones, I have iPads, I have Kobos, I like gadgets, I like tech. I've worked in edit suites, blah blah blah. But it has made me take the green world, the outside world, for granted. And I
Mm.
realized how, for my mental health, for everything really, just to go for a walk, just to take a break from all the intense things that we do all day and just go outside and take a walk, if you're lucky enough to have some green and some birds.
Mm.
You probably read the research that if you actually hear and see birds, it actually improves your mood. It
Mhm.
actually helps. And just that, I think, not even going on a major hike. I'm not talking about like an 8-mile hike or 10-mile hike or something. I'm talking about just appreciating what's out there.
Yeah.
I can breathe this air. I can
Mhm.
see a blue sky. I can hear birds. That alone, not only does it elevate your mood, but that's a baseline appreciation of what we have. And
Yeah.
then when the opportunity comes around to do something, maybe it's as simple as recycling something, or maybe it's as simple as not trying to burn as much fossil fuel or burn anything really.
Mhm.
You might have a choice to make there. You might say, this is going to matter if I do this one little thing. That's the
Mhm.
brilliant title of the book. One Green Thing is just it's just one green thing. You're not trying to remake the whole world in a day. And this is this is the overwhelm of my young 10-year-old son. Like, what, he's a kid, what can you do? He sees the problems, he's smart, he
Mhm.
knows that fossil fuels are an issue. He knows that the way we burn things and create power is an issue, but what's it going to do? So,
Mhm.
but there is one thing you can do to kind of open your mind, at least to the rest of the process.
The one green thing. And it just so happens that it is St. Patrick's Day. I'm dressed in green. You are not. You've officially been pinched.
Oh well.
And yeah, so we can all do one little thing. Yeah, because the radical ideas, right or left, they're hard, right? It's very hard for people to get used to like radical change. But if you put it in a way to where it's like, can we just do one thing? And that can be enough. And I
Yep.
do feed the birds. I feed the
Ah,
birds
nice.
mostly for my cats' entertainment because they like looking at the birds through the glass.
Yeah.
But I see them too. And the Stellar Jays are just leaving right now. And as far as birds, I see buffleheads and ducks outside my office window. So, and I didn't know that they were doing me good. So I'm glad that I was doing better than I thought I was, if that makes sense
Good.
at
Yeah.
all. So yeah, yeah. So you said that you had a bunch of tech things, and you said you had a woo what? What did you say you had?
A Kobo.
Kobo.
Kobo. It's
It sounds like a disease. Oh, yeah, I have a
yeah, well, no,
Kobo.
it's not.
Where is it
It's
located?
Kobo is a competitor to Amazon, and it's a different kind of e-reader that uses e-ink. So I read ebooks on it, and you can scribble
Ah,
on it and make notes and things like that.
awesome. Well, speaking of books, I do want to promote your book. I have a picture of it right here, and
There
it's
we are.
called Surrender. So, an interesting picture. Want to explain? That looks fun.
Well, I brought in a great designer, Paul Palmer Edwards, and I've designed all my other book covers kind of by myself, just as get out some Photoshop and Canva. But he read the book and we talked about things, and he did, gosh, so many test designs. And this cleverly, when you read the book, you'll see this collects some of the themes of the book, but without spoilers. There's a city that's kind of under domes. There's, as we're looking at the picture now, there's an eye, and there's kind of like a AI, artificial intelligence eye watching over people. And people have given me very good feedback about this cover. So I'm grateful for that. And I like that it's a bit mysterious, but I hope it sparks some curiosity.
Yeah, I see like it's kind of a sunsetty scene over water, and it's kind of hazy, and this eye in the middle of that in the city, and all that technology that you were just talking about, as well as AI, right? Because
Yeah,
I guess at the end of the day, we got to figure out what really matters to us in our lives and our own values. And if we value human life and our own lives, the quality of our lives, and going outside, then there's something that you can do. There's something that everybody can do to calm that climate chaos that we have experienced.
yeah.
So I want to share your website with our audience here. And let's go ahead and take a look at it, because I think it is super cool. And of course, you can see that this man is in film. Or did you do this, or did somebody else do it
No,
for you?
someone else did it for me. I wish I could
Oh,
do
I
that.
thought it was you.
I wish I could make something like that. It's very mesmerizing.
I could just stare at it forever. It kind of almost looks like an octopus, but then it looks like an eye. And yeah, it's pretty neat. Oh, now it looks like a
Mm.
duck. Okay, well, so Future X, and there is the book,
Mhm.
Surrender, here. And you want to tell us how you got the name Future X here?
Well, yeah, I started it with a fellow named Ever Gonzalez, and we were making events and podcasts, and we're getting into publishing. And we thought the future is unknown, hence the X. And our copyright lawyer said, there's other things called Future X. Would you consider calling it Future Y? And I said, well, it's kind of an interesting idea, but it doesn't really have the same ring. So Future X is the unknown future.
Oh my gosh, future. I was thinking future, WHY, like why future? And I'm like, no, that's
No,
kind of
no.
self-destructive right
Yeah,
there.
right.
Future Y. No, future X is definitely cooler. And then, so here, if you click on the books tab, you can see this is the Surrender book. And it's available on all sorts of different areas: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, IndieBound, and the Kobo
It's
ebook.
on Kobo, and
Kobo is not a disease, it's an
it's a
ebook.
book, and I just got it. I'll change these buttons later because I just also got it published on Apple
Ooh,
Books.
ah, nice. There's a description of what it is that the splintered into independent domains, which is kind of going on politically
Yeah,
right now. Anyway, we're
right.
really super divided, and but this is a concept that is futuristic, but also is happening right now.
Exactly. Yeah, I was trying to think not too far out. Like this takes place in 2050,
Mhm,
and I was really trying to find a way to reflect in a slightly exaggerated way where we are right now.
mhm.
And all the tech in here, with the exception of a few things, all the political stuff is something I didn't want to write anything that someone would go, well, that's crazy. It's
Hmm.
kind of like, yeah, I could see, a few clicks down the road, we could be there.
Right.
And a lot of what happens to the people in this book is they're finding ways of coping with this, of doing the future. Even though it may look to us, you may be looking at it and saying, that's a really weird way to live. But
Hmm.
we were going out and putting on masks pretty recently,
Yep.
and the people in this book have to wear masks, and we wear a lot more sunscreen now than we did in the 70s. And the
Hmm.
people in this book need to wear protective clothing. But I don't
Yeah.
see that as being that far off. We probably would. I mean, there already is protective clothing that you can buy, but in this book, people wear it all the time outside.
Yeah. That's a good point, and not long ago we were actually wearing masks, and then in this book it centers around one character, but there's lots of different characters in it. Is that what I understand from reading the blurb?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's
Yeah.
a woman. The primary character is an entrepreneur named Cat Keeper, whose company kind of implodes around her, and she gets forced out of her own company, and her husband dies
Oh,
suddenly, and so she's a bit adrift at the beginning of the novel, and she hires an AI savant, a super smart AI dude, to recreate the consciousness of her husband is kind of a super chatbot, but a bit more than that. And
wow.
their relationship builds. It's an example of the weird wonderfulness of writing. I had no idea that relationship was going to be so important in the book.
Wow.
I knew that I wanted this person. I knew I wanted AI. I knew I wanted a chatbot-esque kind of character, but I had no idea that was going to become a big relationship. And I had to go with it because I saw that it was good. And other people, when you write a novel, you have early readers. You have people who
Mhm.
read the super early stuff and say, that doesn't make sense, or you mixed up those dates, or how
Mhm.
come you leave that story behind? That's a good story. So I realized that was something that I needed to work on in this.
Nice. Yeah, I'm totally going to pick it up and read it. And
Great.
so, if you want to visit Lee's website, it is FutureX Studio. And it is just https futurex.studio for those of you who are not on YouTube and are listening to it. And
Mhm.
it's also in the show notes.
Mhm.
And of course, from that website, futurex dot studio /books, you can go and see the books. And then you can follow Lee on Instagram, and he's under Instagram as DocuGuy because apparently there are some nefarious characters named Lee Schneider out there,
That's right.
some of whom have been arrested. Is that right?
That is true. When I Googled myself, I realized when I was setting up Instagram, and for that matter, Twitter ages ago, I realized, I'm not going to be able to use that name, my own name.
That would be so freaky just to find out that your name is like, oh my gosh, there's somebody out there
Right.
committing crimes in my name.
Yeah. Not
Talk
good.
about
Not good.
identity theft. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness gracious. Wow. Well, yes. So please check out Lee and his book. And the book is called Surrender, something he does not like to do, but has written about. And check out his website. Lee, are there any parting words you'd like to say to our audience about chaos, about surrendering, about climate, about one green thing, about St. Patrick's Day, anything?
Well, it's really, I keep coming back to small things you do just to keep yourself sane or to solve big problems. Small things you do can solve big problems, and they can certainly help you cope with the big problems. If I had to give any advice to anybody, I'd probably say try meditation and yoga. Give it a try, or try a walk.
Mm.
Try to walk. We live in a very technical world, techie world. It's not going away. You could probably disappear in a remote cabin someplace, but probably not. At this point, we're living like this. So what's the counterbalance?
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
counterbalance for me is, green stuff, nature, and yoga.
Mhm. I like doing yoga too, and I like green stuff. And oh,
There you
you
go.
don't mean Yoda? You meant yoga?
Yoga,
Okay,
right.
yeah. He's one green thing.
He
I
is
don't
one
know
green
if
thing.
if looking at Yoda is going to be therapeutic, but it definitely does fit in with the wisdom and the greenness and the Saint Patrick's Day. So I
That's
choose to
true.
show Yoda on the screen. Well, again, it was wonderful having you with us today on Calming the Chaos. Thank you so much, Lee, for all you do and your work, and for being such a great guest. And
Thank you.
we will talk soon, I hope.
All right. Thank
Take
you. This
care.
has been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks for listening to Calming the Chaos podcast. You can find all Calming the Chaos podcasts on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Music, Spotify, Amazon, and on YouTube. You can also go to www.calmingthechaospodcast.com for more information and to see all podcast episodes. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing my next podcast episode with you. In the meantime, take care.